Welcome to Blue Iron IP's Patent Myth podcast. I'm Russ Krajak, your host, and the author of Investing in Patents, as well as a soon-to-be-released book called Startup IP Strategy. Blue Iron provides financing for patents, so we look at startup companies and their assets, the patent assets, as having value and trying to figure out how do we create value with those assets. Our view is that 95% of all the patents out there are worthless, and the percentage might even be higher for startup companies. Our aim is to take down some of those existing patent myths and put in better practices so that startups could do a much better job with their IP. A common myth is that I need to get a patent because somebody's going to steal my idea. Usually that's a waste of time. Usually you can do a lot of work doing customer discovery without having to disclose your invention, and therefore you can reduce the risk of the patent. One myth I run into quite frequently is this idea that I need a patent because somebody will steal my idea. And I hear this a bit, especially from first-time inventors or entrepreneurs who are, just kind of getting started, and this might be the first go-round, or even ones where, they really, really, really think they have a great idea. And another thing they often say to me is there's nothing like it in the market. And, this idea of there's nothing like it in the market, inventors turn that into, hey, there's a huge opportunity. I look at there's nothing like it in the market as a big data point. That is a huge a huge red flag. There's nothing like it in the market. There's 7 billion people in this world, and nobody, not a single one of them, thinks that this is important. The market itself is telling you that nobody wants to solve this problem the way that you're talking about. Maybe nobody even recognizes that the problem exists. I mean, that is a huge data point. How do you interpret that data point? Yes, it might be an opportunity, but it also might not be. It might be a big dead end that many have tried and nobody has, climbed that hill or seen fit to do it, or the money just doesn't work out at the end. I don't know, but it's a data point. It's certainly a data point, and you need to figure out how you want to, how you want to interpret that data point. I'll give you a little bit of, a little bit of my experience. A lot of people think about licensing their patents at some point. A startup company might think about spinning out a technology that wasn't core to their business, and maybe they'll package it up with a patent and license it out to somebody, or a patent that they're no longer using because they pivoted or something. Could they license it to somebody? Or independent inventor who thinks, my best route to riches is to license it to somebody. I'll give you a little bit of my experience. I started out as an engineer. I was an inventor 3 or 4 times as, in a corporate environment. And really what that meant was, if you had an idea, you write it down on an invention disclosure form and you send it in. And what that really meant is they paid you $100. They pay you $100 for any invention disclosure form. And so I just treated it like a cash register. When I need some money, I fill out a couple of these things, send them in. My record was 15 of them in a 2-week period. So I was getting after it on the invention disclosures, actually. But anyway, what would happen is those ideas would get processed in the smoke-filled room in the back, and then 2 weeks later, a patent attorney would call and ask me, well, tell me about this invention. I'd talk to him about it, and then a couple weeks later, they'd send me a bunch of paper, and I'd look at it, and then I'd sign some documents, and nothing else would ever happen. That was the end. But I happened to stumble across this idea that I had that was, that was my own, that I did at home, and it was something that I wanted to license. It was this little sawhorse bracket with metal legs. You put 2x4s into, and the legs would fold up and all this. I started learning everything I could about how the process worked, about who manufactured these things, about, I tried to figure out, well, how many sawhorse brackets are manufactured in the US or sold in the US? And I don't know. I know my dad had sawhorses that had these metal brackets, and, he's had them for, probably 40 years now or something. I don't know how many of these things are actually sold. So one of the things I did, and this is a little side note, I would go to Lowe's and Home Depot, and I would count how many were on the shelf, and then go back the next day and I'd count them again, and I'd go back the next day or the next week or whatever, whatever the right cadence was for that. And I just mechanically count them. And and when I go into a Home Depot, a different one, a different city, I'd go over to this, to that shelf and, just look at how many they had in inventory or whatever. And by counting them and seeing how many disappeared every week, well, I could guess they sold 14 of these a week. And that number, it was one piece of data as a data point, and then you multiply it by 1,400 Home Depots and 800 Lowe's, and then you'd kind of, well, okay, the number that they sold per year was 10 million or whatever the number was. It helped me get an order of magnitude, because I didn't know if they sold 10,000 or 100,000 or a million or 10 million or what. I just wanted that order of magnitude to help me figure out what my, what the market was like. As an aside, I'll tell you a little story. I was at Home Depot and I'm counting, I'm just sitting back there with my little notebook and counting number of sawhorse brackets, and it's middle of the day when it's pretty slow and nobody's in there. And the helpful guy in the yellow or orange apron came over, the Home Depot guy, and said, well, what you doing? And I said, well, I got this brand new product. I'm doing market research, trying to figure out how many of these are sold, per week or whatever. And, just help me kind of figure out my market size. And the person was super, super helpful. And this is no longer true at Home Depot, actually. But what they showed me was on the label that's on the rack at Home Depot, there's the big price. But there's also a whole bunch of other numbers and codes and little things around there. It used to be that Home Depot actually put the number of units sold per week on the label. And so you could just walk right up to the product and say, oh, well, here's, 3 different kinds of sawhorse brackets, and this one sold 14 per week, this one sold 2, and this one is sold 0.1. And, or 1 every 4 weeks, essentially, and or whatever, do the math. It used to be you could just walk into Home Depot and do an amazing amount of market research on stuff. And you can look at the, 30 different hammers, and there'll be one that they sell 30 a week, and one right next to it, they sold 3. And it was really interesting to see those differences and, try to figure out what was making why did this one sell 30 and this one only sold 3 when the number, the number 3 one was, so much better looking or whatever, I don't know. But but that was really, really insightful. Now, that information about how many they sell per week is actually available at that Home Depot location. And if you go to any store when business is really slow, Tuesday morning or whatever's their slow time for that particular company, and ask somebody, who's stocking the shelves or, out there to help the customers. And a lot of times they'll just walk over to the computer, look it up and say, oh yeah, here it is, boom, 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 and give you the number that you're looking for. And you ask nicely, they're usually pretty helpful. Anyway, that's just a side tip on how to do some market research. I did some more market research because I had the opportunity to join Waterpik. Waterpik's the company makes the shower massage. We did shower heads. We did the oral irrigator, the thing that sprays water and cleans your teeth. We had some professional oral care for dentists, and we had some other products that we're going through. But I had the chance to join that right at the time where I was really starting to learn about this whole licensing thing and get to know companies in the space and how they operated. And I really wanted the opportunity to sit on the inside of one of these companies, to sit on the inside and understand what's their thought process, what's their evaluation criteria, what do they look for, how does the whole thing work? I just wanted to hear every story I possibly could about it and absorb as much as I can, because my next job was not going to be inside Waterpik. It was going to be outside, coming up with ideas that I was going to license in. At least that's what I thought. And I joined Waterpik right at a really interesting time. We had two products that were in engineering and just kind of getting through engineering at the time I was there. And two of these products had been licensed from someone else. One was a dental product where an actual dentist literally in his garage built this little prototype, had a little motor and a battery, and it wiggled back and forth and all this. He had built a little prototype and had a patent and was able to negotiate a license agreement with Waterpik, and a rather favorable one from what I remember about the terms. The other one was some technology that came from a university, and it was an ozone generator, generated ozone inside water. And that product was this little carafe that we would create ozone inside of it. And ozone's a tremendous disinfectant. Yes, yet at the same time, it's so safe that you can drink it. And anyway, the thing that was amazing to me, and I think the thing that is completely lost on the inventor, is how much investment the company who takes the license, how big an investment they have to make to get that product to market readiness. Even though the inventor, the dentist, came in with this little device and had this little, it was barely functional, we had to completely redesign it. We had to go out and source all the parts and all the electrical parts and the batteries and the connections and the switches and all that kind of stuff. We had to figure out how those are good, figure out which ones we want based on cost and, performance targets and longevity and all kinds of stuff. We had to, run the product through industrial design and get somebody to put those beautiful curves on it and all that. And then we had to, in the engineering side, which is where I was, we had to build the plastic parts that had, that met those outside shapes, but had all these mechanical features inside to assemble the unit and hold all the parts in the right thing so they didn't slide around. And, and then once we built the thing, we had to run it through a whole bunch of life cycle testing and drop testing and immersion testing and shipping problems. And we had to go through packaging and labeling and UL certification and on and on and on. We literally spent $2 million on each one of those products. Each one of those products took $2 million investment to get them to market readiness, where we could put our brand on it and start selling them. One of the things about both of those products is that they both were complete flops. We couldn't sell those to save our life. And $2 million in each product, $4 million total, and they were complete duds. The inventor never made any money. Waterpik never made any money off those things, and it was really, really, I don't know, heartbreaking. But if you think about the emotional or psychological effect of selling a license, trying to license your product or trying to sell your product to a bigger company. And saying, essentially what you're trying to say is, hey, big company, take our product and put it into your product line, or this would be really good for you to, it would fit what you're doing and, complement what you're doing, or it's a great improvement to your existing product. A lot of inventors think about pitching to a company, think, oh yeah, it's brilliant. It's perfect. It would be a perfect addition, a perfect improvement to their product. And you know what? There's a lot of headwind when you're rowing upstream, if you will, if you want to, use a different analogy or different metaphor to, convince somebody of that, because there's a group inside this company that's, the chief technical officer, the director of innovation, the engineering manager, or just the regular, rank and file engineers. Their whole job is to come up with great ideas. And their whole job is to make improvements that's going to keep the company profitable in the future and, crush the competition and all that. That's their entire job. And if you come in there pitching something that, here's a great idea that you guys, essentially that you guys missed, that you guys woulda, coulda, shoulda invented, this extension to your product line that you guys completely botched up. It really comes across as insulting to anybody who's been there at the company for a long time and who has been tasked with coming up with these great ideas. And sometimes these get licensed by a sales pitch to the CEO, and the CEO says, you know what? That would fit in really nicely with our existing product line. Here, let's ink a deal. And then the CEO throws it over the wall to the chief technology officer, the engineering manager, the manufacturing manager, or whoever. And they were the ones that were supposed to come up with a great idea. But instead, their task now is to implement an idea that they didn't come up with, the not invented here syndrome. And there's a huge reluctance, if not outright animosity, within an organization to accepting outside ideas. And this is just, basic human nature. Essentially, you're saying, if you guys were really smart, you would have come up with this idea. But look at me, I'm, Joe Blow in the garage. And, I came up with something that your super smart trained engineers didn't. And there's nothing that's more infuriating to an engineer or an engineering manager as to hear that. Okay, because they're supposed to be the idea people. So what happened at Waterpik? How did those licensed ideas make it into Waterpik? And it took me a while to kind of figure this out. But you know what really happened was Waterpik used to be part of a large publicly traded company called Teledyne. And right about that time, and this is 99, 2000, a private equity company came in and took two different businesses out of Teledyne and put them under one roof. And it was a private equity company. And that transition happened right around the time that I got there. Probably 6 months, 9 months before, maybe it was a year before I got there. And the Waterpik thing, and then we had a pool products company that was in California, was under the same umbrella. But that private equity company came in and they're going to plow some money into this thing and make some changes and improve the products and go forth and conquer. At the time they brought in, they got rid of, all the management at Waterpik, and they brought in people who, they brought in a CTO, a really brilliant guy from Black & Decker, who really knew his stuff. They brought in some manufacturing gurus that, for better for worse, transitioned all our manufacturing from the U.S. to China. They made a bunch of changes, but the point is, the CTO came in and, his task was to reinvigorate this brand. His task was to go try some audacious big changes to reach out and get past, that one product line that Waterpik had been milking for a long, long time, and try to reinvigorate the whole thing. He did. And because he was looking for reinvigoration, because he was looking for new ideas, well, that is the perfect time, that perfect opportunity where they can look and say, you know what? We'll take a chance on that. We'll do a license agreement with that and bring that in-house and make it all, why not? And part of it is he didn't have any legacy or inertia or affiliation or love or, respect or, any feelings at all for the engineering staff that had gone before him. His job was to create, a green field and, really, really turn things on the head. And so that is a really important point, is that inflection periods of a company are when you can do certain types of licensing or acquisition or whatever. That's when you want to reach out and actually, see if you can make something happen in a license agreement. If an engineering manager turns over, or a chief technical officer, or, whatever, if somebody leaves the company and a new person comes in, that new person needs to have good ideas to sell. And so if you can put something in their back pocket, a license agreement that comes in and makes them look like a rock star, well, then that's the perfect way to sell that product, as opposed to going in and trying to sell it to the chief technical officer that's been there for 20 years and is going to be there for another 20. That sale's just not going to happen. One of the things that, that I learned from that, this $2 million investment that Waterpik was making in each one of these products, that was $2 million of engineering. And then once the engineering was done and the product was ready to ship, they had another just a humongous investment in advertising and telling the world about these crazy little inventions, of, convincing the distributors and the retailers to put it on the shelf. There was a lot of work yet to be done, even after that $2 million investment. A lot of advertising, they're actually selling that ozone machine on late night TV and infomercials and stuff, which is somewhat embarrassing, but they did. And, they really struggled to sell any through it. But the point is, there is a huge investment that these guys are going to make if they're going to acquire your product. And the product can be in just the invention form, which is ultra high risk for them, or you can start reducing that risk. And the way you reduce that risk is you get some sales. You go through the process of figuring out how to manufacture the thing. You go through the process of figuring out the right messaging, the right packaging, the right labeling, the right price point, the right distribution channel. You start figuring out all that stuff and start to get some traction. Now it's a lot different. Now the acquiring company or the licensee can measure some of these variables. They can feel like they don't have to take a risk. The person who champions this thing through the company is going to live or die based on how well this thing does. If they license in something and pay, the inventor $1 million and get a license, and then the thing's a complete dud, they're not going to have their job very long. But if they can bring a new product into market that moves the needle and increases sales and increases profits, then they're going to look like a hero. And so your job as, selling the product, selling the invention, selling the patent, selling your business, is to make that person look like a hero. And so you want to address all the risks that they have in their head and help them envision this product being part of their revenue stream. And the more that you put your head into what they're doing, the better off you're going to be. I want to circle back to that original myth, that myth of I need a patent because somebody will steal my idea. And I know I went on a rant about the licensing thing, but I'll usually ask people, okay, well, what are you going to do if you had a patent? What are you going to do? And they're going to say, well, I'm going to tell customers about it, and I'm going to find out if customers really want it. And I usually tell them, you know what? If you are doing customer discovery and you feel that overwhelming need to tell that potential customer about your product, you're doing it all wrong. And one of my favorite books, and I don't remember who wrote it, but it was a little downloadable PDF online that was called The Mom Test. And I loved it because it was the simple and allegory of asking customer questions in a way that your mom will tell you the truth. And I mean, your mom will always love your artwork, and she'll always put it on the refrigerator, no matter what it looked like. She'll tell you it's wonderful, right? And this is what we're talking about. Inventors and entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs that are very, very emotionally attached, which read passionate, they will often really, really, really have this deep fundamental need for affirmation. And that affirmation, they want people to say, this is a great idea. They just want it to happen, and they want this business to be a success. Oh, they want it so badly. And what that does is it unconsciously or consciously forces them to start asking questions of people during customer discovery that leads to specific answers. And they're leading questions. Wouldn't it be nice if you had a self-driving car where you could sit in the back and then zoom through traffic at 100 miles an hour and get there in 5 minutes? Propose, really, really elaborate questions in a way that somebody just has to say yes. And the guy, don't you like to have big cost savings? Don't you like 2 for $1? Don't you like, they'll make you say yes like 12 times and you're sick of answering the yes questions because you know it's the only answer, and it's obvious that that was the only answer, and then they say, well, here's the product, do you like it? And you especially when you look in somebody in the eye and you're showing them your baby, it's really hard for them to call your baby ugly and right in front of you, or they're going to do it in such a way that you're going to ignore all the negative tones or the negative words and kind of latch on to the positive tones, or vice versa. And you won't really capture the reality. You'll be asking questions that you already know the answer to in a way that you only can get the answer that you want, not the answer that you need to hear. And the point of the mom test is to ask behavioral questions. Like, how many times did this event happen to you in the last month? And somebody say, well, seems like it happens like 3 times a month. And you're like, okay, well, did it happen to you last week? No, it probably hasn't happened in like 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, well, so it's not an every week occurrence. It's probably every once a month occurrence that you did this. And when it happened, what'd you do? Oh, well, I just happened to look on my phone and I got the answer and it wasn't a big deal. Or, I just didn't bother fixing it. It was just kind of an annoyance. And, 3 days later, I just forgot about it. That was a huge problem and I had to do all this stuff to fix it, and it was really painful, and I'm really dreading when it happens again, or whatever it is. But you're asking for actual behavioral questions. You're asking for how much time did you spend on that? When was the last time it occurred? How many times do you think it happened over the last year? And you don't ask just, you try to ask multiple questions that kind of, not in a cross-examining, lawyer kind of way, but ask a couple questions. How many times it happened last year, and then how many times it happened last month, and you try to ask them in a way that you can kind of correlate the answer and see which one is probably more realistic. Because people's memories are usually pretty awful about this kind of stuff, and go through these behavioral questions. Try to take as circuitous a route around to get to what that pain point is. And once you've done that, once you've really tried to ask measurable, definitive, relatively easy to verify kind of behavioral questions, just stop right there. You don't have to show them the answer, okay? You're not required to. And if the inventor or entrepreneur is kind of planning the big reveal of their invention at the end of these questions, it turns into this game of, hyping up, getting the person excited and telling them all these features and getting them revved up, and then boom, oh, here's the solution to all your needs. That's not helpful, okay? And if you can just take that reveal out of the whole discussion and just, I'm trying to learn what customers do in these kind of situations and move on to the next one, you're going to take the pressure off of you from, having to sell the product to these people at the first blush. The other thing is that you're going to take the need away from telling people what your invention is. And you're going to be able to really start doing better customer discovery before you get a patent. And maybe you'll do that customer discovery and figure out their needs and their problems or whatever, and find out, hey, there's a whole nother need here that I didn't understand or I didn't appreciate. Or, that path I was going down wasn't very good, so I want to go a different direction. Maybe you can save yourself the entire cost of that patent by doing some really good customer discovery. And the better the customer The better customer discovery happens when you don't tell them your invention. So if you're needing a patent before you do customer discovery, you're really doing it wrong. Well, thanks for listening. I'm Russ Krajak, CEO of Blue Iron IP. We're a patent finance company where we'll make 50 to 100K investments in startup companies to get them decent patent portfolios. And then we'll do loans against patents at $2 to $5 million for later stage companies that have some revenue. You can find me at blueironip.com. You can pick up my book, Investing in Patents, available on Amazon. We're always looking for new deals to finance and syndication partners with angel or venture firms. And please feel free to get in touch with me. And I look forward to chatting with you.